before kindergarten, it was keeping a running total. Like we'd be in the supermarket and we keep a running total of the items. And that, it just, there were a lot of, a lot of those early signs. And basically by kindergarten, by age 4, I had a child who was reading almost anything and understanding it, but was still acting like a preschooler. Which is why we pursued early entry and early kindergarten, thinking that would be, thinking that the idea of waiting another year, especially for a child with a fall birthday who would be almost 6 before starting kindergarten, would not be a good fit. And the idea that, okay, this child's gonna miss Elle's gonna miss the cutoff date by about 6 weeks. So we applied for a waiver on that and got it. And as I said, the school really tried. They did a good job. They did about as good a job as they could do. But I agree. But when you have the kindergarten teacher telling you, yeah, no, this is not going to work, because she said the only reason it worked was that she had a full-time assistant and no other grade had that. And no other grade was going to be able to give this 15 minutes.
And a lot of kindergarten classes don't even have that anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, putting a child that's now 5 and has been speaking in complete sentences since she was 1.
Yeah. And reading since age 1
And okay, so did the reading come, like, had y'all practiced any phonetics or anything?
No, not intentionally. Now, having said that, I am, I'm an educator. So going through things like labeling things in the house was just something I did, because that's something that you do with early childhood. But I never sat down and intentionally taught to read. And in fact, everything I knew said that that's the worst thing you can do. You don't teach, you can't force it. You have to wait for those developmental signs. So we didn't, I didn't teach it. Now, one thing I realized, we also went through a phase of alphabets and of every single possible, and letters in different languages. And I remember, again, this was being down at the college because I was teaching part-time, and having my child in the store go 3 triangles, L tipped over, X. And I realized that my child was reading the Greek letters on the fraternity houses. L tipped over, like wait. So for a while we got a Hebrew alphabet puzzle. And for a while when we first started homeschooling, we were doing Spanish, Greek, and Latin along with English. Which was real fun because I'd had a little bit of Spanish in high school. I'd had some Spanish. I had some French. I had a little bit of Latin. No Greek. So I was trying to learn this along with this young child who was just passionate about languages.
Nice.
And passionate about alphabet. And for a while we were going down to we were fortunate in that my husband was working for a company that included a membership at the Jewish Community Center. So we went down to things at the Jewish Community Center regularly in Hebrew because of the fact that my child was just so passionate about the languages. And this was the preschooler.
Wow.
And then, so, that was my first instance in homeschooling, something that I did not know myself.
And that's what I was going to ask, because, you talk to parents who are kind of intimidated by the notion of just homeschooling kids on regular levels. So you're talking about a child who basically came out the womb already knowing language and everything else.
Yeah.
How did you approach that? How did that make you feel? Like, how do you keep yourself on a up level? Yes.
It's intimidating. And in some ways, I've had parents go, well, you could do it because you were a teacher. It's like, actually being a teacher and having an education background in some ways made it harder. Because I knew how things were supposed to go. And I knew it was supposed to be appropriate for this age. And that what Elle was demanding was not appropriate. So what you really have to do is do the next thing. and look at what your child does. So that included things like emailing a professor at a college in Spain to find out Spanish names for dinosaurs at one point. That included getting books in Latin and Greek and getting song school Latin and doing it with my child and learning it along with them. But that also included knowing which things I needed to find somebody else to help with and which things I needed to outsource, and kind of looking at what can I do, what can somebody else do.
Okay.
Because again, if you have Sheldon Cooper, you're not going to be able to teach him theoretical physics unless you're a theoretical physicist yourself. But you probably can teach him and do math and do history and do language arts and things like that with him. And one of the things that I started doing, and again, it's something I probably wouldn't have done had I not had some of the other parents in the Davidson forums suggesting that I do it, was I started getting college syllabi. So for example, we did a homegrown entomology class, bugs. And what we found was a syllabus from North Carolina State University, bought the textbook, and then just went online and found labs that we could do. Things like observing mealworm, doing ethnograms and observing insects. We borrowed some hissing cockroaches from a friend and observed their behavior. We bought 3D puzzles and assembled them and then drew the anatomy. So it ended up being a pretty good entomology class, even though I'm not a biologist, because I pulled in these resources from outside. And a lot of times, if you look on websites, college classes especially often have their syllabi, and they can become a really useful resource. We did another one where we used an anatomy and physiology book and went through and analyzed all those plastic Halloween skeletons. How accurate were they? Where were they wrong? For a biology-focused kid. So these were in areas that was Elle's focus of interest, but we were able to use resources that we had. And in fact, I've seen Elle pull some of these projects that we did in homeschooling into the classes that they now teach. Because there's things that, again, you can do with a group of homeschoolers. You can have everybody bring in one of these animal skeletons from your Halloween box at home. And we're going to look at the skeleton of a real animal. What did they get right? What did they get wrong? So it's kind of neat to see that. And your parents can be creative, but other parents are going to be your best resource. Other parents who've been a little bit.
How did you find your community?
Yeah, find your community. And that Gifted Homeschoolers Forum is wonderful. If you go to the well-trained mind forums, are primarily classical homeschooling, but they have what they call the Accelerated Learner Forum. And that is a wonderful resource. Those have been by people for years. I love the well-trained mind forums. If your kid's in one of these programs like Davidson or Stanford Online High School, there will be private Facebook groups for parents in that program. And they are wonderful. But, other parents will be your best resource. Because they'll be the ones who suggest, and they'll also be the ones who suggest, this online class is good. This school's good. That's actually how we found Athena's in the first place, was recommendations from other parents. And that's one reason why, that's one reason why I started, I actually, the first time I did a workshop for parents was because the local homeschool group was doing a conference. I put in that I wanted to do a music workshop, and their response was, you talk about giftedness on the local forum a lot. Can you come talk to us about gifted homeschooling? Because we have parents who need that. So that's kind of what led me to do it. It's not that I'm an expert at it so much as that I'm just someone who's been a little farther on the way. I've lived through it. I've survived.
I was about to say, yeah, because you are doing, you have. You have the gift of being. So yeah.
Yeah. So it's a different, and that's a lot of the best resources I've found. And a lot of the best resources for gifted homeschoolers especially are the ones that come from parents of gifted kids. Because they start out with, what does my child need? And a lot of times what their child needs also matches what others. what others need.
Yeah, because y'all are going beyond the standard, because the standard keeps everybody at the average level, but you have children that are well beyond the average level. So it just
well, and the big thing to keep in mind with gifted kids is that is that a gifted 9-year-old who's working on a high school level is still a 9-year-old. And in some ways, they may actually be less mature emotionally, especially again if they're 2E, but also they may or may not have the skills. They may have not had a lot of experience interacting with other kids because other kids aren't on that level intellectually. They can't connect with them. So you want to give them that time to grow up and develop emotionally while still feeding that academic need. That intellectual need is, they have to have that. But it's not necessarily the case that you want to move them ahead faster. And honestly, homeschooling is about the only way to do this that doesn't hold them back or push them ahead. Because even if you have to go to college classes in some areas, and this is something that I honestly do recommend, it works very well for my family, they can go to the college math class and do calculus with 18, 19-year-olds. And they can come back and go to the park day with the 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds. And they can hang out and have fun with the other kids their age. And because they've already gotten that intellectual stimulation done early, it's a lot easier for them to play around with the other kids and to talk about stuff that the other kids want to talk about. So it's almost like priming the pump in a way. Similarly, finding areas that they're not good at is important. For my kid, it was cheerleading. We did cheer for years. Not particularly good at it, not particularly coordinated. There were kids who just were so much better. But having that experience of being part of a team and working at something that's hard is so valuable when school is easy. And when school is easy, when you're with people who are a lot older than you are. For other kids, and for some of the kids I teach, it's music. They like music. They're not necessarily the most talented at music, even though they're talented at other things. Sports can be wonderful. But you actually, in some ways, want your gifted kid to be the kid who's the third string bench warmer on the basketball team. Because then they have to work to try to get off that bench when maybe they don't have to work so hard in other parts of their lives.
Like a humbling piece, a humbling factor.
Well, and it's a chance that they can have other chance where they have to learn to ask for help from other people. Because there was a point at which Elle was helping 3/4 of the junior high, the middle school cheer team trained at the same gym we did. And they come over for practice, and Elle would end up helping them with their algebra homework. And then they'd help Elle with tumbling. And at the time, Elle was taking college math classes, college math and science classes. So, it was a chance to interact with kids the same age and for it to be a mutual support system, which otherwise you don't get. I mean, Elle was also helping college classmates with their homework.
Nice. So how do you keep that? Because you talked about the intellectual, like the academics part being there, like she has that emotionally, and being able to express herself in the ages that she was in because of like her being, like you said, being not necessarily around peers, but being around older individuals, but still being 9 nonetheless, like, and operating and being able to express themselves emotionally at a 9-year-old level, but performing academically on an 18, 19-year-old level.
Yep.
How do you find that balance?
Well, what I discovered is that if you build it, they will come. Mm-hmm. So what we did was we did clubs. Is that I ran clubs for years in areas that Elle was interested in and that other kids were. So for years, we did a mythology club where we did the National Mythology Exam. And this is another thing I strongly recommend for parents of gifted kids. The American Classical League is very, very gifted kid friendly. So we would just put out on the local homeschool forums all right, we're going to do this. We're going to get together once a month. We're going to talk about mythology. We're going to each, and what happened was that each kid would present something each time. They would all prepare something about that topic for that month. And then in April, when the test came out, we would sit the exam together, and they would all, they'd all cheer, they'd all take the exam, they'd all celebrate. And what this did was it gave a way to interact intellectually, but it was, again, kids who were interested in it. And what happened was we had an hour of academic stuff, and then we had an hour of running around the backyard being silly, acting out Greek and Roman battles. Or an hour of throwing water balloons at each other. And that provided a steady peer group of kids who did things together. And as the time went on, we started to find, okay, this child's interested in bats. Let's do something about bats. This child's interested in physics. Let's make catapults and do egg drop projects. So it kind of grew to supporting each other. And then again, if you find a homeschool community, one thing that's nice about homeschoolers is that they usually are multi-age settings. So you can find the perk days and the field trips and the social stuff. And I will say that the homeschool group we founded, we referred to ourselves at times as being the refugee homeschoolers, because almost all of us had kids they just did not fit into a school setting. Almost half of us had teaching degrees, and we were teachers, and our kids just didn't fit. So find a group that matches you, because you may not fit in a group of parents who plan to homeschool from the time their children were babies, because that's what everybody in their church does.
But you didn't plan to homeschool.
Yeah, you don't plan to it. And, there's parents who will homeschool no matter what. Mm. And that may or may not be a group you fit in. It might be. They may be wonderful women. You might fit in with them perfectly. But you may find that you fit in better with the refugee homeschoolers for whom the homeschool didn't work, for the school system didn't work. And I'm just going to try to hang on for another year, and maybe the next school will be better. And then every year they realize, yeah, no, not going to work this time either. And some of them will go back for school for high school, some won't. And you just go with it. And that worked really well for us until, I will say that Elle graduated in 2020 or in 2021. And 2020, 2021 totally, it shattered our homeschool community. And I will say that with the high schoolers I work with now, with my what I call my bonus kids, it's been a lot harder to make that community again because it broke. And while the younger parents and the younger kids are rebuilding it, it's been really hard for the high schoolers. A lot of the high schoolers went back to school in 2021 because I just didn't have that. They had that year of nothing. So it's been a little harder for those guys now. And for the one who's graduating this year, where he's found his community has been that he's a swim coach and lifeguard. So he gets a lot of his community at the pool. And that's ended up helping. So that's ended up helping to rebuild part of that. And again, that's not the fact, the fact that he's a talented musician and writer doesn't affect that. Isn't affected at the pool, but it means that he gets to hang out with other teenagers who are also swim coaches. So that's helped to rebuild that a little bit, because the homeschool community kind of fell apart a bit for a couple of years there.
Gotcha. But you host workshops and for gifted parents, for parents that have gifted children.
Yeah, what I usually do, I do them for things like the conference coming up in July in Memphis. That's what I'll do. Come in and I'll help. What we'll do is we'll walk through an example of this is how you look at your child. This is what we look at examples. And I can also point them towards resources that exist in Memphis, because I know specifically what's here. But a lot of times when I work with parents, that we'll just sit down over coffee and we'll do exactly that. We'll sit down. Okay, what are you good at? What is your child good at? What areas do you feel comfortable teaching? What areas do you go, okay, this kid is scaring me. I have no prayer of being able to understand this. And just talk and just do it. And sometimes we'll actually do sessions where I'll tutor a child for a while with the parent in the room so they can see how I interact with the child. And they can see things like, this is how we can use games for a kid who's good at math, but doesn't really like doing book work. This is how I can see what they can do in math without having to make them write stuff down. But the whole goal is for the parent to take over the education.
Gotcha. And then you also do music.
Yes.
How do you fit music into all of this?
I'm busy. But with that, I teach. What I have is that I teach at Singleton Community Center, which is through Parks and Rec. And I have my private piano students who range in age from 3 up to adult. And I would say that almost half of my kids are gifted in 2E. I think they get a lot of them. And then I also teach classes during the day for homeschoolers. And those are so much fun. My current homeschool class has kids from age 7 to 17. And what we'll do is we will come together and we will figure out, how are we going to break down this arrangement? How are we going to play this with the instruments we have? How are we going to use the instruments we have in the classroom? Because you have kids who can't read music yet and kids who are extremely advanced. And they learn to support each other. And in fact, my older homeschoolers are supporting my preschoolers. So yesterday we worked on, what are we going to do to play along with these preschoolers and support my preschool students? Because they're part of the community too. And what it ends up being is a social group. The other thing that I love is that I have my homeschool class set up, and we have a homeschool art class in the morning. And then we have a half-hour break, and I have a homeschool music class in the afternoon. So they all hang out in my room for that time in between and eat lunch and just socialize together. And it's great to see them get to do it in a very relaxed environment. And some of these kids are in the same activities together. Some of them go to the same tutorials together. Some of them don't. So that's been, that's been fun, because that's my primary job. And that's what I moved to after homeschool.
Okay.
That's what I moved to after homeschooling, was that about the time that Elle started doing most of the classes at the college. And I realized that I'm really not homeschooling much anymore. I started with 1 day a week, and then it's now moved up to, I teach 5 days a week.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But
do you teach all instruments, or?
I teach piano, woodwinds, and percussion.
Okay.
Not a brass player, not a string player.
Gotcha. Sweet. And y'all meet in person, or is this virtual?
We meet in person.
Okay.
Yeah, the Athena stuff's online, but Singleton's in person.
Okay. Cool. Nice. I love what you got going on and what you're sharing with families, because I'm sure a lot of parents definitely need your assistance with helping to understand what to do with their geniuses.
Yes. Well, I mean, what the title I use for workshops is "Hang on tight to the ears," and it comes from a quote from Robert A. Heinlein, that when riding a tiger, the principal thing to remember is hang on tight to the ears and don't look down. And the fact is, homeschooling a gifted kid feels like you went to the shelter and you adopted a kitten. You knew what to expect with a kitten. You'd read all the books about having a kitten, except that now your kitten is much bigger, and it has claws and teeth, and it can rip you to shreds. And you're trying to figure out, what the heck do I do with this tiger cub? And worse yet, when you go to other parents, a lot of them look at you and go, don't be a tiger mom. They're a baby, just take care of them. And that's what we want to find, is we want to find that you're not being a tiger mom when your 6-year-old is working on has memorized multiplication tables. Or when your 7-year-old is printing out placement tests for algebra and doing them and leaving them on your computer, which happened, by the way. You're not being a tiger mom to start doing algebra with your 7 and 8-year-old when they want to do algebra. You're not being a tiger mom to be doing Latin with a 5-year-old who wants to learn Latin. You're not being a tiger mom to let your 12-year-old fill up the backyard and turn it into a garden because they are fascinated with plants and growing things. You are not pushing them. They are pulling you. You are hanging on tight and trying not to fall down.
Yes.
And that's what I want parents to know, is that that's okay. and especially if your homeschool community is on the unschooly side and on the let them go at their own pace, it can be really hard where you can have parents go, you really can feel like you don't fit in. Because you've got the kid who they need to have 4 hours of school or they're bouncing off the walls. And parents are going, yeah, we do 30 minutes a day, we're good. And you're going, if my child doesn't do an hour of math a day, I can't get into bed at night. Because that need is so strong, it has to be filled. And the other thing I want parents to know is that it is okay to say, I can't do it alone. Because for me, I don't know that I could have done it all the years without those online classes. Because for those online classes, there was an hour that my child was interacting and talking with and bouncing things off of other people and other gifted kids and an adult who was there to provide feedback, but also to rein it in and to steer it in the right direction. The writing classes, especially, history was something that ended up being really good to do through some of these online programs. Because one of the things you see with gifted kids is that they become very hypersensitive. They pick up on implications. So, for example, we could not get past the Civil War and Reconstruction in my house when we tried it at home. Because every time we did, and we got into Reconstruction of civil rights, Elle was very aware that this was something that was very recent in time, that this had happened right here, that there were people who were still alive who had lived through this. And it was just too much emotionally. It would lead to meltdowns. By doing that with other gifted kids and doing it with Kirsten at Athena's, they were able to be other kids who kept saying, yeah, this sucks, this is awful, this is horrible. And because it was awful and horrible as a group, they could start thinking about what can we do? So you end up with kids who are very strong advocates and are very socially justice focused because they've now been able to steer that. And in fact, one of the instructors at Athena's is currently a PhD religion major. And that's pretty much what she did, was she's gone into social justice peacemaking focus. So that's what she teaches, is social justice. And that can happen with literature, where books can get too intense, especially if they're reading above level. And doing it with other kids can get them past that hump. So because other kids their age don't pick up on the man's inhumanity to man, but another gifted kid does. So that's the point where it's okay to ask for help. It is okay to outsource some of this stuff so that you have the strength to be a parent the rest of the time. Because it's exhausting.
I'm sure it sounds like
it can be very hard. It can be very exhausting. And you need that. So that's where you need that support network. Indeed. I'll also say that if you don't have other parents of gifted kids in your area and you want support from other parents, you want a parent who will hear you and listen and understand that I love this kid, I'm doing the best I can. Find parents of kids with disabilities. But especially parents of kids with autism. My autism, those are the parents, those have saved my life at times. Because it might be, their child might still be working on learning to read in some cases. Their children were struggling in a lot of different ways, but they understood in ways that sometimes parents of smart kids who were not at the same level of intensity did. So, find those parents, find that network, find it online, find it in person, but find the person who will understand when you are just in tears and can't go on, and will tell you, yeah, I understand. And they may understand it because they've been there in a totally different way, but they've been there. Because that's what's going to get you through.
Support, community is needed. And I know you said earlier, Donna, that build it and they will come. So even if you don't have the necessary
you sometimes
community,
you build it. And and one of the things that I will also say about building it, when I first started homeschooling, I was really nervous about hosting stuff because we went to some of these things at other people's houses and they had these really awesome setups. and these gorgeous ones. I'm like, I don't have that. But I realized what I did have was a screen porch. So we did a lot of things outside on that screen porch in the backyard.
Nice.
Because I didn't necessarily have the room to have a dozen people in my house, but we could have people in the backyard. You can meet at local parks. We did park day for a long time. You can find library community rooms. There are resources. Don't feel embarrassed if you don't necessarily have the resources that some of the people in your community have. Because trust me, if you want to get the kids together to do messy science projects, there will be parents who will be more than happy to do that with you. And you'll discover after you talk to these parents that some of them, they feel that everybody feels inadequate in different ways. So, the parent who looks like they have the perfect house and everything's pulled together, and you wonder how the heck, how can they do this? And you discover afterwards that they feel like they're falling apart too.
Yeah, everybody has their struggles that they don't necessarily talk about or wear on their sleeve. So yes.
So you discover that, don't feel embarrassed to put yourself out there and try. Because there are other parents who are in the same boat, and you're going to discover that some of the parents who look like they have it all together don't.
Do not.
Because I have not met many homeschoolers who feel like they're being successful at it, even when they absolutely are.
Yes.
And part of the thing about homeschooling is that there's nobody to blame. If your child is struggling in public school, yes, you can feel bad as a parent, but you can also say it's a teacher, it's a school, it's their fault. When you homeschool, it's on you. So if you've got the kid who just can't master a skill, you're freaking out about it. It's like, okay, I failed as a teacher, I failed as a parent. And let me tell you, even if you've got the kid who academics is easy, there's going to be something else that they struggle with. They're going to be the kid who says something on the playground to hurt some other kid's feelings and just doesn't realize they did it. They're going to be the kid who just doesn't necessarily have the common sense to come in out of the rain. They're going to be the kid who struggles with executive functioning and who they're great at doing stuff, but you despair how they're ever going to survive on their own because the only reason they can do it is that you're being their frontal cortex. But you know what? They all get through. And when you look at them on the other side, it's worth it.
Right. Actually, Donna, I talked to a couple of parents that kids, but they never talked on this level of reaching and how to identify or teach or meet them where they're at and things of that nature. So I really appreciate this. You taught me much. I didn't even know what 2E was. Now I know. So I appreciate all of this. Where can we find you? Where can we look you up?
Okay, you can find me on Making Music with Kids. That's my Facebook page for my studio. If you go on, as I said, if you go on to Gifted Homeschoolers Forum or to Well Trained Mind Forums and you ask them, was any question about Gifted, I'll probably be there. And I'm Donna Metler on Well Trained Mind.
With Kids.
And of course, if you want to do online classes, if your kids want to do my gifted classes or want to do classes about almost any subject, check us out at Athena's Advanced Academy. And in fact, Elle will be teaching 2 classes that start next week, one on herpetology and one on animal behavior, and I'll be the moderator and mentor for those classes. And there will be several, and there will be other mid-spring classes will be starting next week.
Okay, cool. Before I let you go, can you give 3 things get school the
Okay, you're breaking up a little. Can you repeat that?
I have so three pieces of advice for get to move.
Okay, the first.
Yes, I know this lovely
Okay,
internet.
okay, the
You
first.
got it.
Okay, the first thing is trust yourself. Trust your parent instincts. Trust your parent radar. Number two, trust your child. If they are saying that this is something I need, this is something I want to do, go for it, even if it means putting some other things to the side. And number three, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Oh, yes.
You don't have to do it alone.
Nice. Nice, nice. Thank you so much, Donna. Yes, parents, you heard her. Ask for help. Look, do your research, find the support, find your community. If you don't have a community, you can build your community. Just understand that this is not a journey that you have to do alone. Don't get overwhelmed with those scholars that you have that came out the womb reading full books and being able to identify things that you don't know how in the world they got there. Seek help. Seek help. Please, please, please. But just know that this is not a journey you have to take alone. So yeah.